The World, Part 1. World. Have you ever accomplished a task and been satisfied and at peace? Little tiny amounts of energy spent doing work, building the mind, understanding consciousness enough to be who you are, no matter what your hair color or ethnicity or dialect, and found the freedom to speak with your voice, see with your eyes, and breathe with your body, and exhale on your own. Wholeness, enlightenment. There's many different terms for these beneficial accomplishments. Describe them in 1,000 different words. Simplify them down into this small little granule of prayer. And then there's a decision to be made. Does that prayer stay with the body, the brain, and the mind? Does that prayer get shared? Does that body, that brain, and that mind share the prayer with an imaginary wolf friend? And create a whole story for little children and make their eyes big again? Maybe because they've been abused their whole life or they've gone through cancer treatment like I did. They're hard. Hard. Words to consider, I think personally. When the world outside of these words and this body talking, moving, and speaking, has people die from gunshots, have people stabbed to death, folks crying in the streets, groups marching and breaking windows and smashing buildings, voting and declaring they know what's wrong with the world. And they're going to fix it. They're going to make the world better. And you got to decide, just like me, like, what do you do out in that world? Do you join the revolution for socialist Bernie Sanders in the 2020 election? Do you try to impeach the president, Mr. Donald Trump, again and again and again, and then let Bernie Sanders and then let Pete Buttigieg and then let the next great leader take charge. I once worked at New Horizons, a homeless and at-risk Christian youth organization, nonprofit place in Seattle, Washington, where they now, I think, do housing and I think different services. But in 2012, they were trying to find out with what they were doing how to best help the children and the kids and the young adults in Seattle who are not only homeless but at risk and, like Noah, neglected a little bit, or a lot in some cases. And so there was this recognition for the need to assist and the need to help. And there were all of these different people, all of these different persons in this spiritual, religious place of services for the public. And I was an urban ministry fellow, hired by the communications director. His name was Jim. And he had served time in prison and was very honest and upfront. He stole a lot of money. He did some sort of extortion with his, I think, place of employment, and had to serve a number of years in prison. And while he was in prison, he learned not only about religion, but chaplaincy. And he was my boss. And we worked for hours and hours and days and weeks and months trying to go down the path of mentorship, giving people the freedom, giving people the conscious awareness to not have their attention misdirected and flat out messed with. And that's when I started studying neuroscience, and that's when I started learning about Krishnamurti, and I started to find out how I could go and do stuff in the world and not be scared or afraid or hurt, because it was when I had chordoma and didn't even know it. It was getting worse and worse and worse, and towards the end of my urban ministry fellowship, I had to stop working because it was so bad. And I worked with kids, and I worked with young adults, and they called most of the people, you know, that visited the organization's drop-in center street kids. And we worked hard, worked our butts off. And the problems had not only to do with religion, because there's a lot of problems in religion and what was happening within the organization with Jim and his vision for mentorship and doing what the founders of the organization said was, you walk alongside these young people. don't show up and then you don't just leave. And you do what the Dalai Lama says, you know, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. You never give up. And that's what we did. And started. And I continued when I was homeless afterwards, and when I was homeless again. And I saw those same young people I worked with in 2012 again, years later, in the city. Some skinnier than I saw them before, some on more drugs than I had ever seen them on. End part 1.